the more points of reference you have, the more effective the context is. This is James Governor from RedMonk, and I'm with Alois Reitbauer from Dynatrace, and we are here to talk about observability. It's the London Eye. It's huge. Here we are at ground level. This thing looks big. Obviously, the city, we can't really see much of what's going on. Well, what we're going to do is talk about observability, context, and situation so that you can better understand what it is that you're actually seeing. Now, Alois, you work at an observability vendor, right? Dynatrace.
Yeah, but we don't build things like this.
You don't build things like
this.
That
would be cool, though. That would be cool, though.
But you do build infrastructure so that you can see things more effectively. So yeah, we're here to see something. One of the first things as we think about what does it mean to get that kind of context is, here we are, we're in a city that I know very well.
And I don't know that well. I know that there's Big Ben over there. That's what I do know. Big
Ben's just over there. But in general, the question is, what's the orientation of the city? How do we get around? How do we understand what's going on? And that's what we're here to discuss and see. Okay, so we're talking about context.
Yes.
We're in the city. For you, you're looking around, you don't know where you are.
I don't know where Big Ben is. I know where the London Eye is. I don't know where the Tate and some pauses, but that's pretty much it.
About the limits of your context.
Pretty much, yes.
I think what's interesting for me from an observability and observing the city perspective is I think I built the context extremely well, but you have to make sure that you're actually looking around, because it's very easy sort of looking this way. You think, well, look, I'm on the Thames, it's east-west. House of Parliament is there, so therefore east is that way. But in fact, it turns out that until you've got more points of reference to better understand how everything fits together, then you begin to understand that east is actually further that way. I think that's super interesting and important, that it's that you get the context through having multiple, the context, the more points of reference you have, the more effective the context is.
I think at some point it's also too many different types of context. So how much do you need? Because otherwise it gets just a distraction. It's just overwhelming. I think that's the problem.
We're getting higher and higher in this. It's getting more and more overwhelming. On that note, though, I've got to say, one thing that's super interesting, at ground level, you don't really have how many trees there are, quite how green it is. You want a vantage point to actually see the parts of life of the city. The higher you get, the more you see. But yeah, okay, well, how much context is too much context, Alois?
I think at a point where it doesn't necessarily affect any decisions that you're taking. At this conversation a lot, like how much data do you actually need to collect? And I think we're for the first time ever entering the age of we want less data, because data obviously also costs money. Because we're now no longer talking about megabytes or gigabytes, we're talking about petabytes, at some point exabytes. Which data are you actually looking at? What actually drives decisions? If you don't care about the data, why do you actually collecting it? Why do we even have it? When does it become a distraction? I think we are right now, to some extent, almost on the transition from, data towards events. I don't care about the data. I only care about if there's something interesting in the data that eventually makes me look at it, but not looking at the raw data.
And so how are you managing that from a hierarchical perspective? Like, how do you decide when we actually have enough data? What's the approach at Dynatrace?
I think it's an approach that we figured out for us like a very long time ago. When you talk to most people in operations, the number one question they ask is, what changed? Like, what is normal and what is now different than to what normal is? So reducing it more or less to the change points or what changed in your data. Like even here, if we would have to drive right now, we would most likely know how to get from here to your place. But suddenly if there is like a traffic jam, a blockade, or it's just a street closing, you would have to read it. Like, what changed? How did my perception of how I get from A to B change? And what are the actions that I now need to take? So it's about what information that is actionable in the sense it requires you to take action, and how much do you need? So that's why we moved into the anomaly detection, trying to combine things and leaving the rest out of it and showing you, okay, this is what it was before, and this is how it is right now. And then trying to make more sense out of it. But for like just the normal stuff that didn't change at all, even taking this out of the equation, because people might just spend a lot of time on looking at things that actually do not matter.
Well, historically in London, I think that anomaly, you're in a city where there are new buildings. So if we look over there, see, where is St. Paul's?
supposed to be. See, even right now we have two circles, which is so
So we've got some balls over there behind the Oxo building. Now, historically, balls with line of sight everywhere in the city, right? St. Paul's is just the biggest building. Yeah. Whereas now, of course, you've got all these towers. Now the first place you look for is the Shard over there, or some of the taller, the walkie-talkie. We're looking for different reference points. Where historically in the city, wherever you were, you'd be like, oh yeah, there's the Dome of St. Paul's. So all of these buildings, I think, are anomalies. In some ways, it gets harder to know what's going on, but then you end up with even more impressive waypoints.
When we were standing down, we thought this thing is terribly slow. Now we're in it, we're going round, we perceive it as being way faster. So which of our reference points is now correct? As we're going back to ground level, I think for me, it's like the whole perception of how fast the thing is going changed again. Just by having the building right next to you. So more precision, actually, versus the sky and like all the buildings in the background.
You think it's more accurate because we're closer to
it is more accurate, and it even feels faster right now than it did, like slightly. So once we started to see the building, I think that the closer your reference point is, your perception changes. But the question is now, what is actually true? Because all of those things were true at a certain point in time for us, because it was the best perception we could get out of it. So reference points do matter, and agreement on reference points do matter. And that's the interesting thing. We wanted to look at London as a city, but was it realized just our means of observability, which is the London Eye. Yep. We weren't even not entirely sure how that thing is behaving.
We'd have to go on it a few more times to understand the behavior, and we'd be in better shape. I mean, there might be some people that didn't mind going on it again.
Yeah, and now we see the plumbing of observability. It is as pretty as most people would think, right?
Well, that's your world. You love living in that. Somebody does have to do the plumbing, the nitty-gritty work.
Yeah, but
I'm glad I don't have to do that. We'll leave that to you, Alois. You can do the plumbing.
We could do the plumbing.
You can do the infrastructure.
That's what we can do, yeah.
That's what you do with Dynatrace, isn't it? So that was excellent. I've lived in London for many years. Certainly even before the London Eye was built, I've never been on it before. So in fact, you did bring a new context for me on that journey. So yeah. We've talked about context, we've talked about data volumes, we've talked about situational awareness, and basically that's about observability.